The problem is that the frames aren't long enough to spell out to the camera.
Talk to Matt today?
Yeah. My daughter did her semester abroad.
We will call the 6:30 p.m. public hearing to order. This is an application on behalf of Steele Road, LLC, seeking approval of an amendment to Special Development District 139, located at 243 Steele Road and known as the Residences at Steele Road, requesting approval of a new 30-unit residential building in the northwest area of the property and associated site improvements, including landscape, parking, and stormwater management design changes. Roll call, Ms. LeBreau.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Fay. Here. Ms. Kerrigan. Here. Mr. Sweeney. Here. Mr. Winograd. Here. And Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. We will start with a presentation from the applicant.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council. It's a pleasure to be here this evening on behalf of the applicant, Steele Road, LLC. My name is Robin Pearson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Alter & Pearson in Glastonbury, Connecticut. As you've heard from the reading of the notice, this is an amendment to Special Development District 139 at 243 Steele Road, and it's known as the Residences at Steele Road. The application requests an amendment to allow construction of a new building, a 30-unit building, which would be building number 7 within the complex. I have already provided to the town clerk a copy of the sign affidavit. The sign has been posted for the required 7 full days, and indeed more, prior to the public hearing. In fact, there have been 2 signs along Steele Road. Our format and presenters this evening are as follows. We'll begin with Jeff Sager, who will speak on behalf of the owner of the property, Steele Road LLC, and also the Metro Realty Group Ltd., which is the developer and operator of the Residences at Steele Road. And he's going to give, for your benefit, an overview of some of the history that brought us to this particular point in time, and also specifically why the applicant is now proposing a new and additional building number 7 for this development. He's going to be followed by Chuck Corsi, Corsi and Company. And Chuck, as some of you may recall, who sat on prior applications with regard to this property, has worked consistently with the applicant since the applicant started working on this particular piece of property, to coordinate activities, to bring information to the neighboring communities and the immediate residential abutters, and all the while seeking input through this process as to their concerns, their interests, and their feeling about each iteration of this development as it's gone forward. You should have a copy of his report to date, recently updated, and he'll spend a few minutes to review for you the effort with regard to bringing information about building number 7, this particular proposal, to the community. He'll be followed by Tom Daly, who is our PE, the engineer for this particular proposal. He's with Milone and McBroom, and he's going to describe for you basically the site plan changes that are going to take place with regard to this particular application. He'll be followed by Mark Vertucci. Mark Vertucci is the traffic engineer that's been associated with this development from its inception. He's with the firm of Fuss and O'Neill, and he will also update you. I think his presentation is quite interesting, not only because he'll talk about the implications with regard to traffic generation with this new building, but also he can bring you up to speed on what the study of the results of current conditions are with regard to the site as it is currently configured, and also how that relates back to what the applicant projected in terms of traffic and projections with regard to the prior approval. Also here this evening is John Stewart. He's the applicant's landscape architect. He's not going to make a presentation, but should you have any specific questions with regard to landscaping, he is here. I want to put that on the record. Also here is Charlie Nyberg, who's the architect working on this development. He's here should you have any questions on the building design, though frankly it involves Building 7 has the same design elements as the rest of the development that's already come to fruition, and so those elements that were previously acceptable are being carried through with regard to this proposed building number 7. At the conclusion of our presentation, and we will be using a PowerPoint and slides for both your benefit and also for the audience, I'll just quickly summarize the staff and agency comments received to date and review the reasons as to why we believe this application is definitely worthy of your approval. So with that, I'd like to call up Mr. Sager. I should also introduce Kyle Richards, who's going to be pushing buttons and is an integral part of the Metro team, so you should know who he is.
And West Hartford resident. Madam Mayor, members of the West Hartford Town Council, my name is Jeff Sager. I'm here on behalf of 243 Steele Road. So I'd like to begin, if I may, with some actual photographs. Carol, if you can go back for 1 second, please. So that's an actual photograph. I know that you're all familiar with the community, so the pictures will really tell the story. And I wanted to show you some of the pictures of the community. So that's the entrance. So Steele Road is comprised of 6 buildings and a clubhouse. This is the elevations of the buildings. Each building has 13 garages. The garages open to a corridor in the buildings. Our clubhouse. So that is a picture of our club room in the clubhouse. Fitness, we have both cardio and weights. Another shot of the club room. We have a billiards room. This is a shot of a 2-bedroom elevation. You see the dinette from a different angle. The master baths have double vanities. So I'm not going to emphasize the structures too much. I want to talk more about who lives in the community and the investments that we've made in the community. So our community is comprised of 160 homes. It's 100% occupied. The buildings were all pre-leased as they were constructed, which is rare. I've never had that in my career. We have more women living in the community than men. Very few school-aged children at 5, a total of 242 persons. Our median age is 32. The incomes, that's the median income, as you can see, is quite high. Occupants per bedroom is quite low. Empty nesters, right around the 25% we had projected. The one difference in that is that I hadn't anticipated that virtually all of the empty nesters would either be longtime West Hartford residents or people with a connection to West Hartford, usually a son or daughter. I had envisioned people selling homes in the valley, moving to be closer to the center. And really what we have is virtually all West Hartford residents. So aside from the empty nesters, 3/4 of our community, it's interesting, and I think we had discussed this at the time of the application in 2014. So 62%, roughly 2/3, coming from outside of Hartford County, and 42% from outside Connecticut. So these are the states they hail from and the countries. We have representation from virtually all the area's major employers. I would define our resident profile broadly as professional. It runs the gamut in seniority and industry sector. We have a lot of healthcare, biotech, life sciences in general, doctors, nurse practitioners, researchers, a lot of engineers. I'm sure you're aware that the defense and aerospace companies are hiring lots of engineers. And we have educators from local institutions such as University of St. Joseph and University of Hartford. There had been limited concern expressed in 2014. I know you weren't all on the council in 2014, that the community might be loud and it might not fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. And I hope we've demonstrated otherwise, because I think the community presents as very quiet, and I think it fits in very well. We actually have members of the immediate neighborhood who've moved into the community. We have a lot of people living in the immediate community who have parents in the community. We also have, as I mentioned, a lot of people from the greater West Hartford community, and again, parents, sons, and daughters. So interestingly, we have over 100 residents from outside Connecticut. So the reason I'm embellishing this point, I shouldn't say embellishing, emphasizing this point, excuse me, is that contrary to the view of some pundits, we do in fact attract to this region a broad and diverse group of young professionals who are coming here from all over the country and in some instances all over the world. If you take out our empty nesters and you look at the remaining population, the remaining 77%, our median age is 29 and a half. So we have very successfully attracted that elusive demographic that the pundits will suggest to you is only interested in leaving Connecticut. And to emphasize that point, what I read in the paper is not consistent with what I see in my business. So perhaps most importantly, I wanted to provide you with an update of our community engagement and the investments we made in the community, especially for those of you not here in 2014. So there are various things we did off-site after the outreach to the community. We installed a pedestrian walk phase to Elizabeth Park, so it's on all four corners. So people accessing Elizabeth Park have the benefit of being able to push the traffic button and shut the lights down in all four directions. There had been a lot of testimony from residents on Stratford Road that there was a lot of cut-through traffic avoiding the light at Steele and Albany, and that they were coming down the street at high rates of speed, obviously a danger to their children. And working with the engineering department and with the neighborhood, we designed a dead-end street which we called a hammerhead. That's the shape of it. And it's complete with granite curbing. You see the vertical granite bollards. We have the cobblestone emergency access and gate. We met continually, even after the approval, with the residents of Steele Road, because we hadn't reached a consensus as to what it is they wanted. The problem was that Steele Road was just all asphalt, kind of looked like a runway, but it was very inviting psychologically to a driver to travel at high rates of speed. And after a lot of meetings with the residents on Steele Road, especially those north of Stratford, we arrived at a solution, and we went through a lot of solutions and offered some much more expensive solutions, but this is a solution that they wanted. So you have a flush cobblestone median, 3 feet wide, and the objective was to narrow the travel lanes so that, again, psychologically, to the driver on the street, they're going to slow down a little bit because they have less room to maneuver. In the interest, and Mark Vertucci, our traffic engineer, is here this evening, and he will tell you the result of that install on the speeds. In the interest of full disclosure, I do want to mention that one of the residents on Steele Road objected to the visual aesthetic of that crack seal that you see there. In the depictions that we had done of the install, we hadn't shown that. It frankly hadn't occurred to me, but we needed to seal it. It's part of the construction methods that are required by the engineering department. So we also paid for 2 flashing speed limit signs that the engineering, I think it's the engineering department, moves around on Steele Road. They try to put them in different positions so that drivers that drive there every day don't become used to them. And for those of you who might not know, although I'm sure you all do, so across the street from us is the School for Young Children that is owned by St. Joseph, University of St. Joseph, owned and operated by. So there had been a lot of testimony that parents dropping off children at the School for Young Children in adverse weather conditions and otherwise were queuing along Steele Road and discharging the children, and that it was a dangerous condition. So to resolve that, what we did is we constructed at our cost, at no cost to University of St. Joseph or the school, and this is a commitment we've made in perpetuity, or for as long as it remains a school, 24 parking spaces. And those parking spaces are used by the teachers at the School for Young Children, and that frees up 24 parking spaces at the school. So now the parents can drive onto the school premises to discharge the children. I do think from time to time there's still some discharge on Steele Road, but it's certainly a lot less than it was. University of St. Joseph recently, kind of after the fact, just this last summer, requested if we could help them with a pedestrian connection between their campus and the Macaulay sidewalk system to get them to the School for Young Children without having to go onto Asylum. So we installed this at our cost over this last summer. Our proposal for building number 7. The building is situated in the northwest corner of the site. We did not file the application until we had an opportunity to sit down with our neighbors. So we met with the president and the CFO of University of St. Joseph, and the CFO is here this evening. And we also met with representatives from Macaulay. And until we had their acceptance and endorsement of our proposal, we did not even file our application here. Because I think it's quite obvious when you look at this plan, the distance from Steele Road and the proximity to those 2 neighbors, that to me was my biggest concern, and I wanted to talk it through. There were things that came up in those conversations and modifications that we made to our application as a result, and as always, the outreach proved to be very beneficial. It was very informative for us. So this is the building itself that we're proposing. It's very similar to the other buildings on the campus. It's a little bit deeper. And the reason for that is that when we initially built the 6 buildings, they included 6 units that were 2-bedroom plus den. So that is our largest unit. There's a floor plan now. So it's 1,638 square feet. It's the size of a home. And we had never built a unit that big before, and we thought we were kind of taking a chance. And in fact, I now have a waiting list for those units for at least another 6. I have a waiting list of 11 people, but 6 are for this unit. And 2/3 of them are empty nesters who are interested in moving in. But in the new building that we're proposing here, building number 7, we would add 6 of this style unit. So it's 30 apartments overall, 21 bedroom units, 4 2-bedroom units, 6 of this 2-bedroom plus den, 14 garages, and an elevator in the building. So now 3 of our 7 if this were to be approved, 3 of the 7 buildings would have an elevator. So why should this community grow? The main reason is that you, the town council, the town, has created through its planning, its approvals, just by the very nature of your community, you've created a place where people want to live. And all I'm doing is giving those people the ability to live here. We think there's a clear shortage of the unit that I just showed you, that is predominantly empty nesters and longtime West Hartford residents. I also believe in the long-term value of West Hartford, and this gives us the ability to make another investment in West Hartford. But I honestly believe that we are providing a very good solution for West Hartford residents for the very long term, because we had, just in the outreach that we recently did, part of that outreach was to residents in our own community. And when I heard the testimony from people how they couldn't find a place to live, they looked for years, nothing was right, and then this came along and it was perfect. We would hear this from 7 or 8 couples that were there, and then they would tell stories of 7 or 8 couples who weren't able to get in for one reason, because we were full. But whether it's those empty nesters or the demographic that elusive demographic, there are a lot of other units being constructed in other towns, but I would submit to you that these people want to live in West Hartford. And we don't think it's a good idea for them to go elsewhere. We believe that this is the place for them to be. So I would just sum up by saying, I believe that we've done since 2014 what we said we'd do. And I also want to thank you for the approvals that we've received to date, because it's been quite a privilege to build this community. And I also want to say it's been terrific to work with people at the town. Extremely, they're vigilant in protecting the town, but they're extremely professional and business friendly. And I mean this sincerely, it was a real pleasure to work with them. Our projections on traffic were accurate. I think the quality and consistency of the construction is what we represented. We delivered on time. If Building 7 were to be approved, we'll be $1 million taxpayer in town. And I know when we initially made our proposal, there's always the question, how's this going to work out? But, I would hope now that you have more confidence in our ability to perform. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sager.
Mayor Cantor, Leader Barnes, and members of the Town Council, my name is Chuck Corsi. I reside at 21 Walbridge Road in West Hartford, Connecticut. I conducted the neighborhood outreach for this application, and before you, please find an updated outreach report that I distributed at the beginning of the meeting. Before I begin with a summary of my outreach efforts, I want to talk about what outreach is and what it isn't. First and foremost, what it isn't, it's not an opportunity, it's not going out and trying to find support for the project. That's not the idea. True outreach is going out early on in the process to find out, one, to provide an overview of the project for neighbors, give them a chance to ask questions, and then most importantly, find out what their concerns are and, if possible, address those concerns. The West Hartford Town Council, you've always encouraged developers who are coming into town to propose new projects that developers should do an extensive outreach of the neighborhood in advance of any public hearings. It's customarily that outreach has been 300 feet from the property in question. That's neighbors, residents, businesses, property owners within 300 feet. I go beyond that 300 feet, and in this instance, that was no exception. We did go well beyond 300 feet of the property. The outreach that we conducted included Buckingham and Trumbull Streets to the south, Stratford Road and Steele Road to the north and west. In total, there were 75 residential homes on Steele, Stratford, Buckingham, and Trumbull. As Mr. Sager said, we also reached out and had discussions with the University of St. Joseph, which also includes the School for Young Children, as well as the Mercy community. New this year, which wasn't present in our last outreach efforts for this project, were the 237 residents of Steele Road, 243 Steele Road. And we had invited all of the members, all the residents who lived on Steele Road to come to an informational session at the clubhouse that Mr. Sager had showed you earlier on. For that meeting of the residents at Steele Road, you have a sign-in sheet there. It was, Mr. Sager talked a little bit about the meeting. It was very nice. A lot of the people, the couples that were there are folks that I've known their kids for years. As Mr. Sager said, there was one couple there in particular that moved there specifically because one of their children lived on Stratford Road. And you can see some of the concerns or issues that were brought up by some of the residences. I think the most pressing one for the residents is there that they wanted more lawn furniture around the pool, but there were also some other issues that they were concerned about, construction times during the construction of the new project, and access and how that would impact them. The objective, again, for outreach is to have substantive discussions with folks individually, hopefully, and so that there's an open dialogue. The first thing that we did is we had 3 meetings that we invited folks to. The first meeting was for residents on Steele Road. The next meeting was for residents of Stratford Road. And then the third meeting for residents of Buckingham and Trumbull. As was in the past, we had found that the concerns that folks had seemed to be similar to where their neighborhood was, so we kept it in under those same groupings. We only had one person who attended any of those meetings, and I believe you had heard from that individual. After we had these 3 sessions, and again, my job is to go out there and look for trouble. I want to engage people. I want to talk to them. That's the only way that I can find out what their concerns are, and the only way that we can work to address those concerns. So I then went through the 75 names that we had, and I attempted to reach all of them by phone. Some I was successful in reaching, many I left messages. You can see through the outreach report that a lot of people chose not to return my phone calls. Not to be deterred, I walked the neighborhood after that, and again, on a third attempt, left letters in people's doors, not their mailbox, asking them if they would like to have a presentation and an opportunity to ask questions and raise concerns. I'd be more than happy to meet with them. So from the report, you'll notice that some folks did not have any immediate concerns that I talked to, and most did not reach back to me. You will find there are 3 folks in particular that did have some concerns, one of which Mr. Sager already mentioned, Mr. Lee, and his concerns were not specifically about the addition. It was, again, about the crack seal on the pavement. Mr. Kevin Martinez from 268 Steele Road had a concern about traffic, and he was hoping that there would be a 4-way stop sign at the Stratford, Steele, and Mercy intersection there. And then Miss Holly Fortner at 39 Stratford Road, she said that while the project may be successful now, she worries about the future viability as the market changes in the future. Again, we worked very hard to go out there and try and meet with people face to face, gave them every opportunity to have that interaction. And with that, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Corsi. Are there any questions? Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Corsi, thanks for your presentation. I wasn't on the council in 2014, but I have an understanding of the history and what was done. You performed the outreach in 2014, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of your outreach this time around
Yep.
versus 2014, did it change at all? Did you hit the same doors? Was the scope different at all?
The initial outreach is the same for both. Again, those Stratford, Buckingham, Trumbull, and Steele Road. I started with the 500 feet. Again, your council, you encourage developers, although it's not written in resolution, perhaps it might be one day, but you encourage developers that they should reach within 300 feet of the property. We went further than that. The interest then, as we did the outreach, it grew beyond that. You had people from the golf club area that were very, since it was a new project, they had interest in it. You had people in the Morley area that had interest. And we ended up doing a couple of meetings where we invited those groups as well.
Okay, so just so I understand, the answer would be then, on the initial phase, in terms of you actually hitting doors, it was the same, 2014 as
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
The difference is subsequent to your initial outreach, probably because there was...
Well, it was actually a recommendation by the council.
Okay.
That we go out there and actually have a public meeting where we invited, and again, I don't believe public meetings are the best way to do outreach because you don't have the opportunity to do that individual one-on-one. Sometimes you get people that are shy that don't want to speak in a meeting, so what I do is I make every effort to be able to talk to somebody individually, face-to-face, on their turf, not in a public meeting. But the council back in 2014 had asked that we schedule a town meeting, more or less, that was open to the entire town and was advertised towards that purpose.
Okay, and then just to be clear, though, you did do some outreach in you said the golf course neighborhood?
Well, yeah, I mean, they were included in the townwide meeting.
But what does that mean? Does that mean there were notices sent
Yes.
out to them?
No,
at
there
the
weren't
time?
notices sent out to them. It was noticed in the paper.
Okay.
And there was a golf club association, Hartford Golf Club Neighborhood Association, not affiliated with the golf club, but they had actually emailed their members to let them know. So you had different neighborhood groups that were informing their neighbors.
And then you had another one at Morley? Is that what you're saying?
No, we just had that one meeting.
At Morley?
No, it was at Town Hall. It was up in room 400.
Okay, but you mentioned Morley. What
The
was it?
Morley neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And so for this application, same sort of due diligence, other than knocking on the doors, was not done. Is that correct?
No, the knocking down the doors in the immediate neighborhood
Right.
that we initially, it was the same as last time.
Correct.
Yeah.
The other things were different.
Right.
That wasn't done this
Right.
time. All right. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Corsi.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Tom Daly with Milo and McBroom. I'm a professional engineer and the engineer on the particular project. I know Jeff walked you through the location of it, but I would like to take a moment to kind of give you a little more in the detail. So as you can see, there's an overall site plan, as you saw, as Jeff presented. Located at the bottom of the map is Steele Road. So if you're standing on Steele Road, we're talking about the far, far back right corner of the property. You'll also see on the right-hand side of the map is the access drive into Macaulay. You can see the Macaulay building up in the upper right-hand corner, and then located to the topmost part of this map is actually University of St. Joseph. We have Trumbull and Governor Square on to the left. This to orient you is also, north is pointing to the right. So as part of our application, we keep on referring to Building 7, and that's really the darker shade building that you're seeing up in the upper right-hand corner. The area that of Building 7 today is currently occupied by basically a sloped-up lawn area. So actually this area is about, currently today, is about 4 to 6 feet higher than the parking lot directly adjacent. And right on the back side of that is really just a high, tall grass area. Currently, there's also a sanitary sewer that runs through here that serves Macaulay that we'll have to relocate. And there's a paved ditch that runs through there that was actually installed back in the day to directly to the left of Building 7 is our stormwater management basin. It's was designed for both this project and the Macaulay project. So a little blow up. There's a little blow up we focus in. So we have buildings 4 and 5 to the south. So there's really a couple components. One of the items, so we're not modifying any of the driveways or the road network here. We're really building upon existing infrastructure that exists today. But as we build Building 7, we have currently parking located on that side of the existing entrance drive, so we have to relocate that. So just to the north of Building 4 and 5, we'll be installing about 20 parking spaces there. And then also to the south of Building 7, we'll be putting in about 20 spaces in that location. So your regulations call for 1.5 spaces per unit. We're at 1.6, so we still exceed that. And my experience going out on the site on many times is that parking ratio is working quite nicely for the project. So we wanted to maintain that same type of ratio. What you can see also to the top part is an application that might have been before you in the past. This is the new building that University of St. Joseph has built, and they had put in a cul-de-sac and a turnaround here. So it's actually, we had to get off of Google Earth because it's fairly new. Located to the right, as I said, is this access drive that goes to a back loading dock at Macaulay. This was probably more appropriate for TPC and wetlands, but as I said, located to the left of the building is our stormwater basin. We had to make some slight modifications to that, and we also had to reroute some drainage and sanitary sewer systems around the building. In terms of landscaping, the approach here was to mimic the palette of materials that if you go out there, this building is going to look like it was just the same as part of the overall project. So those same type of palette of materials that you see around the existing building will be mimicked around here. One element that we are adding is you can see a large evergreen screen that is located along the property line. When we first built this project, we did put in a chain link fence along there. And it was simply just a dividing line because we obviously have young students at the Gengris Center on that side, and we put that fence in. But I think part of the screening is we're going to be doing a heavy evergreen screen against that just to create a visual buffer, both for us, because there's a parking lot right on the other side, and also for the University of St. Joseph. So the project actually settles in very nicely into the landscape. It's really off in a separate area. We still meet all the standards required by your regulations. We didn't have to come forward and ask any waivers on the zoning applications. With that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions now, or I'd be more than happy to come back later on, whatever is the council's choice.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Any questions for? Okay, Mary. Ms. Fay?
Quick question. Building all these.
It's funny.
Question is-
Charlie Nyberg just asked me the same question, and
Yeah, what's the?
it's really a length. The width, the depth is similar, except for these two appendages, and those are correct. I mean, if I'm wrong, they're to accommodate those units that Jeff was explaining to you. But to give you some context, Building 4 is a width of 185 feet. This building is 218, so it's approximately 18% longer. Same height, but the length is longer for this particular building.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Winograd?
Right now, is there anything at that property currently in that space?
In this area,
Yes.
located right now is, I'd say about the first 20 feet is a sloped lawn. And then as you get over the top of the hill, it's tall grass. It's
Okay.
meadow, wildflower type thing.
All right. I'm just noticing, I'm reading the Health Department's letter of approval in your
Yes.
packet, where it actually, they say, it's our understanding that the application proposes demolition of an existing structure. So I don't know whether that was their mistake or some,
I think they took the last letter and wrote it forward.
Okay.
So, also, the other thing is, we didn't have their letter when we initially submitted, so we submitted their original letter in the packet, but subsequent in your packet, you should have a new updated letter from, what's the date on the letter that you have there?
You're right, that is June,
Correct.
as an old one. Okay,
Correct.
so there's an
We had-
updated.
But you should have in your packet a new updated letter from Steve Hewitt that he corrected that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So it was from a timing standpoint, that's how we approached it.
And,
But there is no structure there. It just
and that has been updated in terms of the capacity currently is.
Correct.
They've taken that into account.
Your regulation, frankly, it's really MDC water and sewer, but your regulations kind of refer to the health district as if it was a septic system. But we went through the process and they did provide that letter. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Davidoff. Oh, you don't? Okay. All right, Ms. Kerrigan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't know whether this is the appropriate time to be asking this question, and unfortunately, having received this and not really had a moment to read through it, and I don't want to duplicate what Ben's questions were. Can you just talk a little bit about the wetlands and the water course and all that kind of stuff?
Sure. So currently today, if you see that little dot right there, that was flagged as a wetland. And what happened is, when Macaulay was built, I think they did an expansion of this building here. Their storm drainage discharges right here, and they built a sediment basin, which is kind of a depression that any road sands come off, it has a place to settle out before it goes into the bigger basin. And what happened is, it never got maintained. So the sand built up, cattails grew, and a wetland scientist chose to flag it as wetland. We didn't flag the wetlands. Frankly, it's our opinion of our wetland scientists. It probably should have been flagged because it was a man-made sediment trap. Should not have been flagged. It was a man-made sediment trap that they didn't clean out, so it got cattails in it. But if you recall, before, maybe you do or don't, but before our application, there was a previous application for a large assisted living facility. And they were going to partially reconstruct the convent and put an expansion for an assisted living facility. The project was approved, but never went forward. But the soil scientist on that application flagged the wetlands. So we felt we had to kind of stick with those wetland flagging and go forward and present to the commissions as such, as opposed to trying to argue about whether it's a wetland or not. That assisted living facility actually had a driveway going right through the middle of that wetland pocket we're talking about, and received approval for filling of it. So at the time there was also a small wetland pocket located here where it was probably smaller than me to you. It's actually a paved ditch, and the pavement broke up and some cattails grew up. So somebody took a fairly liberal approach to flagging of the wetlands. But we said, that's the record. We're not going to argue with it. We're going to go forward as such. And so we got a wetlands approval to fill this one. And then, so we recently have received wetlands approval to fill this wetland pocket. We have that sediment trap that I just talked about. While it does provide a value, right, to capture those sediments before they go down, we'll be replacing that right here. And one of the presentations we gave to the Wetlands Commission is, and we actually took it out of the presentation here because we didn't think it was germane, the basin when we came onto the site really had no value to it. It was basically a paved ditch right through a lawn area. You get a chance to go out there today, it's a very diverse environment now. Wildflowers, berry-producing plants. It really testament to both John Stewart for his planting plan and Metro to do it. But you got to see the before and after. It really came out fantastic. And that was part of the Wetlands Commission, I think, felt that was a positive and very much a trade-off on that filling of that small man-made wetland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Thank you. Is there any other questions for Mr. Daly? Oh, Mr. Winograd.
Sorry, for those counting, that's number 2. So now I'm sorry, I can't find what you're referring to in our documents. I don't see anything other than the 2014. Yeah, but that's wetland. I'm still looking at the
health district.
the health, and
Yeah.
I see DRAC,
Yeah.
and I'm not finding police or fire, which we usually see as well, so I'm just not sure whether we've got everything.
In terms of staff comments, we received planning comments and engineering comments.
And there it is.
I will read those for the record.
Okay,
after.
and then, as Robin indicated, I met with the engineering staff, we have addressed all their concerns, and then we addressed all the plans, so the revised plans before you, but the letter that you may have in your packet was like the last thing to come in, so maybe it didn't get into your packet. Okay.
Again, I just want to make sure that we have everything.
Correct.
Incomplete. And again, in terms of the, so I see this letter dated January 31st,
Yeah.
so obviously late.
Yeah.
Also, I don't see a report from police and fire, which I
had only seen an
usually get.
email, I thought I saw an email
Maybe
or
I'm-
something that's saying it was simply, there was
No
no
objection.
comments that we saw. Besides the engineering planning, all the other staff departments had signed off.
Okay, we'll make sure that it's in here.
It was in the manila folder with
Was it
was
in that
a
one?
copy of an email.
Okay,
that I don't.
thank you.
I have a copy of the package if you don't. It starts several pages clipped together with a memo from Todd Dumay, dated February 2nd, and paper clipped to it are the email chain from fire, ending with the fire comments, and a couple of pages down is a copy of that health district.
All right,
But I
thank
can
you.
give you the copy.
Okay, no, as long as somebody has it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Anything else? No? Okay, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Reed.
much.
Good evening. I'm Mark Fertucci. I'm a senior transportation engineer at Fuss & O'Neill in Manchester, also a registered professional engineer and professional traffic operations engineer. Fuss & O'Neill did prepare the traffic impact statement for this development expansion. It was dated November 2017, and I just wanted to briefly present the findings of that study for you here tonight. Just quickly to orient you, site is located here on the west side of Steele Road. Steele Road here running north-south on the map. Route 44, Albany Avenue running to the east and west across the top of the screen, and Asylum Avenue running east to west across the bottom of the screen. As part of our traffic study, we did review these intersections that are circled in green. So Albany at Steele, Steele at Stratford Road, the site driveway, and also Steele at Asylum. As Jeff Sager had mentioned earlier, there were some traffic calming improvements that have been installed on Steele Road here between Albany Avenue and Stratford Road. There is a flush Belgian block median that had been installed by Metro Realty after the last application that we had, and the traffic, as I'll present to you in a little bit, that the speeds on the road have actually gone down as a result of that installation by a couple miles per hour, which obviously is good news. Also, we, as Jeff mentioned, Stratford Road here in the plan is no longer connected up here to the north at Wetton Road. It is now a cul-de-sac, and it's a two-way traffic road, so we eliminated here any potential for cut-through traffic that could have occurred from the development up here to Route 44 as you head towards Hartford. I did want to briefly describe some of the traffic counts that we did out here. We went ahead, given that the development, the 160 units, is now in place. We went back out and we recounted all of these intersections. We counted the site driveway to get an idea of what this is actually generating in comparison to what we projected in our original traffic study back in 2014. So we did turning movement counts at each of our study intersections during the morning and the afternoon peak hours of traffic. These are typically the highest traffic hours of the day. The morning peak hour was 7:30 to 8:30 a.m., and the afternoon peak hour was 4:45 to 5:45. And what the counts indicated was that this existing fully occupied development with 160 units is actually generating less than what we projected by our 2014 traffic study, which utilized ITE rates. These are Institute of Transportation Engineers. Trip projections are kind of an industry standard of what we normally use to project traffic volumes for developments. So just specifically what we had in the morning peak hour of traffic, we had projected in 2014 that this development would generate 82 trips. Actual count was 68 trips, so it's about 17% lower. And in the afternoon peak hour, we had projected 100 trips, and it's actually generating 74, so that's about a 26% reduction in what we had projected. So as far as the additional 30 units, what will they add to the traffic already on the road network? We decided we would go ahead and be conservative and use those ITE rates, even though we have evidence here that they're high, but we went ahead and we used them again. And the ITE rates would indicate for the additional 30 units that these units will generate 11 additional trips in the morning peak hour of traffic and 14 additional trips in the afternoon peak hour of traffic. So, I mean, as you can see, these are really de minimis numbers here. If you consider the fact that the traffic is, it's coming out of the site and it's splitting basically 50-50 to the north and south. So at any one point on Steele Road, you're only adding between 5 and 7 cars. That's a trip roughly every 8 to 12 minutes. So really a negligible increase in traffic. So what this is saying, again, is the additional traffic generated by the proposed additional 30 units, when you include that, the entire Steele Road development, which will now be 190 units, will generate fewer trips than what we had projected for the 160 unit development back in 2014. And obviously those trip rates were approved by the town and approved by the DOT at that time. Looking at some of the other intersections, we recounted all of these as well, and without getting into specifics on all the movements, I'll say they were substantially similar to what our projections were 3 years ago. The movements, we had some movements that went up, and we expected them to go up due to the additional development here, but there were also several movements where we expected a traffic increase, and they really didn't change at all. Some of the movements actually even went down that we had expected to go up. So overall, there has been no substantial change in the traffic operations or the overall traffic volumes at our 4 study intersections. We looked at crash data, seeing as 3 more years have elapsed. We looked at the latest 3 years of crash data from the Yukon repository, and similar to our conclusion 3 years ago, we did not identify any crash patterns in the study area. There were no abnormal crash rates. Again, consistent with our 2014 study findings and indicative that the additional traffic from the Steele Road development has not compromised the safety of any of the study intersections. And lastly, I wanted to hit on those speeds, which I referenced earlier. We did do some traffic counts back in speed counts with the tube counter across Steele Road back in 2014. And those tube counts recorded speeds of 40 miles per hour in the northbound direction and 39 miles per hour in the southbound direction. The town has since redone those speed counts in 2016. So this is after our traffic calming improvements were implemented, and the new speeds, the latest speeds recorded were 37 miles per hour in both directions. So there has been a 2 to 3 mile per hour reduction in the speeds on Steele Road, which is indicative that these traffic calming improvements have had some impact, some positive impact on the speeds of traffic on Steele Road. So just to conclude again, The additional 30 units proposed here will generate a minimal amount of additional traffic on the adjacent road network. Again, we're talking between 11 and 14 trips in the peak hours. The existing development trip generation is less than what we had projected 3 years ago. And the sum of these existing trips plus the additional trips from the 30 units are going to be less than the total projected traffic that we had 3 years ago for the 160 unit development. So essentially what we're saying is we can add these 30 units, still have less traffic than we projected for 3 years ago. And those original projections were approved by the town and the DOT at the time. I did want to note, as I mentioned, the DOT lastly, that this development, since we are expanding it, we do have to go back to the Office of the State Traffic Administration for an administrative approval. So pending approval here at the town, we would then go ahead and submit to OSTA for their administrative review and approval. I will note that when they looked at this 3 years ago, they had no comments on the application. And also your engineering department has reviewed our traffic study and did not have any comments on it either. With that, I can either take any questions you have now, or I can turn it back to Robin and she has some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Ricciucci. I think, well, if there's any questions for Mr. Ricciucci. Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple follow-up. So just for clarity of the record, the current traffic is less than what you originally projected, correct?
Current traffic from the, being generated by the development is less.
But fair to say, because there are buildings there has been an increase in overall traffic on Steele Road since the construction, right?
Correct. Some of the movements on Steele Road have experienced an increase in traffic.
Right.
Consistent with or less than the projections that we had before.
Fine, but there's been an increase of traffic. Mm-hmm. And so now that there's going to be an additional building on the property, fair to say that those roads will experience another increase in traffic, fair to say?
Very de minimis increase, right?
But though, an increase, all right?
Very small.
Okay. I guess that's
fairly noticeable.
Well, you know, that small is sort of a subjective statement, and your report's based on objective measures, right?
Yeah, I mean, we typically don't have the benefit of actually having real counts at a development. So this is something I can say that, you know, we're pretty confident here. We have real data that's showing that our numbers are less than what the industry standard would project. And as a result, you know, the net total traffic that we're going to have after this additional 30 units is still less than the net total traffic we had projected for 160 units 3 years ago, that we had already presented back then had a minimal impact on the adjacent road network.
No, and I appreciate it. The punchline, though, is there will be increased traffic. And so I just objected to the word small because there are people in the community who are concerned about the level of traffic. And I think as long as we focus on the objective numbers, the issue of whether it's small or de minimis, I think should be left to the community. But thank you, sir.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anybody else? I think we did receive an email with a question of backup on Steele Road and Fern Street. And I just wanted to, it doesn't look like that was part of the review, and I just wanted to know if you had any comments. I just received it later this afternoon. So.
Right. You know, I did see that comment, and there was some discussion about this 3 years ago. Fern is obviously off to the south of Asylum. So this was beyond the limits of our study area, but what we did have here is we had projected, 20% of the traffic on Steele would head to the south towards that intersection. And although we recounted this intersection, it's hard to say what percentage of the traffic actually is going south there, but what I did do is I compared the counts, the overall traffic counts on Steele south of Asylum. Actually, I've got it over at my chair, but just generally speaking, without getting into the numbers, we actually saw in the afternoon the counts are lower today than what they were just the actual existing counts are lower than what the existing counts were in 2014 in the afternoon peak hour. In the morning, they were slightly higher. So there wasn't, again, it wasn't a large increase certainly in traffic on Steele Road south of Asylum.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you, Mr. Vertucci.
You're welcome, thanks.
I have just asked Mr. Vertucci if he would just put the real numbers. Do you have them readily accessible before I just so you'll have them for the actual counts?
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. You know, Attorney Pearson, I think Mr. Davidoff had a question. I don't know if you mind answering that while we're...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Attorney Pearson, thank you to your presenters this evening with respect to what changes you want to make to the SDD, the engineering comments, the traffic, and the community outreach. But what has been not mentioned yet in your presentation, and I do have a question, was in 2014, the council was dealing with an application that originally was submitted that was 200 units, and it was felt that that was too dense for the parcel, and the applicant submitted an application for 150 units, which we passed. I think it was a vote of 8-1 at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then there was an amendment to increase it from 150 to 160. This evening, you're asking the council to increase the parcel from 160 to 190, which in my calculations is 10 units less than the 200 originally thought in 2014. I'd like to get an explanation from the applicant with respect to the change in circumstances with respect to the number of units on that parcel and what has changed from 2014 to 2018 that would be reasons for us to support something that in 2014 at 200 there was no comfort level for at this table.
Okay, let me start out by saying, first of all, this is a very deliberative body. And any time you decide an application, you're deciding it based on the facts that are specific to that application that comes before you. For an applicant, it's our responsibility to go through the standards that you have in your zoning regulations to decide what should be considered and whether those standards have been met in order to validate a vote to approve or not to approve. You have very specific standards with regard to that. Zoning is not static. Things do change. Circumstances do change. In this instance, as we've, I think, underscored for you through the course of our presentation this evening, we've been able to answer all kinds of questions with regard to what the impact of this particular development would be on the community. And I think it's fair to say there were certainly extensive fears about traffic generation originally, which have been answered. There were concerns about who would actually choose to live in this facility. I think you've gotten a very positive indication as to who lives there, how they are young professionals often, empty nesters also, all individuals that are getting an opportunity to both reside in this community and learn to appreciate and enjoy this community, possibly also furthering their ability to stay in the community or their desire to stay in the community, and also people who support other businesses. Every time an application comes before you, it's a new application. There's something different about this application than the one that was presented last time. Both the information that we've garnered for you and this layout is different from what was exactly looked at. And don't forget also, you never denied the 200 unit version. It's just that it was clearly something that was of a concern both to the community and many of the neighbors, and also to members of this commission, such that it obviously made sense to go back and out of an enormous amount of concern for the issues that were raised to scale it back down. There were concerns also about buffering and landscaping, about treatment of how the traffic for the school for young children across the street would be handled. All kinds of issues that have since been addressed by the applicant, and we've proven to you now with empirical information that we didn't have then. All we had, or you had before you, were our projections and our claims that indeed these would be positive, that with the development of this community, it would have a positive impact on the community. And I think now you have empirical evidence that shows that indeed that is the way it has all worked out. So if I were to respond and summarize the main points that I think should be left with when you look at this, one, zoning is not static. Things change. Applicants come before this commission and request things that maybe 10 years ago the council would not have approved. The information in support of this application has changed. We've been able to show you that the impacts of the visual impact, the traffic impacts, the impacts on the community itself, the benefits to other neighbors have all turned out to be positive. We've shown you that this particular application before you right now is for one building that is to the rear of the development. In terms of the issues you have to assess when you decide this, and let me just remind you what those standards are. In considering whether this one building, because that's what's before you now, whether this one building is appropriate, you need to look at that the property shall not be less than the minimum required lot size in any district unless for a subdivision, which is not relevant. In your findings, you have to look at whether it will be in harmony with the overall objective of the comprehensive plan, and we certainly don't think there's anything about an additional building to the rear that will not be in harmony. Superior to a plan possible under the regular standards of this chapter. There are a lot of reasons why that is the case, and I'll go through the findings afterwards. In harmony with the actual permitted development of adjacent properties. It's certainly in harmony with the institutional uses in the area, and we do not feel that it's going to have any negative impact on the single-family residential uses in the area, and that the total density and development in terms of floor space, dwelling units, and land coverage will not exceed that permitted in the district. So I know this was a question that came up in 2016 also, and at that time, there was a discussion as to whether or not a deal per se had been made. But zoning is not done by deals. You certainly have a right to deny this application, but in doing that, you'd have to look at what's being proposed here against your standards for this particular application. You're not voting on something that was said or presented or presumed or argued for back in 2014. You're looking at whether this new building is appropriate. And if you decide it's not, and it doesn't meet your standards, and it's not good for the community, it's going to be detrimental to the neighborhood, it's not in harmony, and it's not going to do any of those other positive things that you look for when you decide a special development district, then certainly you are, it's appropriate to deny it. But again, it should be looked at on its own right now. That's the application that's before you. And Mr. Sager would also like to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. So earlier in my presentation, I mentioned that I was surprised that in the empty nester population, there was that nexus, there was that Hartford. I didn't anticipate it to be as strong as it was. Just doing some simple math, So every one of those people has a heartfelt story. And as I begin to know the people in the community, I hear those stories. But in any event, these people, we present a long-term housing. Also for their sons. Very significant. And I would submit to you the thing that didn't see that nexus as strong as it turned out to be. I honestly believe big homes wanted to put that. I would say in addition to that, that the economy is different in the following respect. So we have just created an innovation zone on your western. I believe right now in my business, right? So not reading the newspapers, in my business, we have, residential portfolio, office buildings, etc. We believe that this community right now is at an inflection point, that we are really coming back strong. Aerospace, defense, life sciences, insurance. They're coming back very, very strong. We have employers here who can't hire people fast enough. They can't find them. But part of that recruitment process, what's driving that innovation, is the talent. And we hear the talent's only interested in going to New York and Boston. Well, guess what? That's not true. But part of the inducement is communities like this. I didn't understand that in 2014. And I evaluated all that. And I fight for that with a passion in West Hartford and in Farmington, because it's important not just to the town, I think it's important to the region. And when you look at the people that we have living here, aside from the empty nesters that are longtime West Hartford residents, these are very important people. This talent is driving the innovation that is transforming all these companies. You look on any of these big company websites right now, and all they talk about is digital transformation, and that's all being driven. And I don't want them to go to Brooklyn to find that talent and create their excel. I don't want them to go to Boston. I want them to come here. But when they recruit that person wants a great place to live. And we've got that here. This is a once-in-a-lifetime location. I didn't foresee the strength of this community. It is a lot stronger than I ever anticipated. I think that we're providing multiple generations. I can't imagine a place in town where we could get 30 units and have it less of an impact. I think it's critically important. And I understand that it's different. But it is different. It's 4 years later and it's different. So.
Thank you, Mr. Steger. That was powerful. I think, I'm sorry, Mr. Davidoff, you were.
I'm sorry. My question, Attorney Pearson and Mr. Sager, was not one of criticism. I just thought it was a question that really needed to be put on the record so that my colleagues and the public could hear what a successful venture looks like and why people choose our community in West Hartford to live. And what your project at 100% occupancy demonstrates is that people want to be here in West Hartford. And contrary to a lot of the dialogue we read about in the region, this is a success story. And prior to your testimony just now, okay, I wasn't getting that from the presentation. And I thought that was very significant to understand why an additional building on this parcel was so significant. You pointed out in your presentation very little impact with respect to the engineering concerns. There are none, as demonstrated through staff reports. The traffic, your expert testified was de minimis. With respect to the late communications we got on in our emails today with respect to Fern and Steele, you pointed out for the record that that was beyond the scope of what your project looked at with respect to traffic impact. And we didn't even look at that back in 2014 either. So what I wanted to get on the record, which I thought was really important, and which you did get, was the fact that these are the criteria that we need to decide this current application by. And yes, there are reasons why this parcel can accommodate an additional building without having a negative impact upon those who reside in the area. So that's that point. The other point was in Mr. Corsi's outreach. There are legitimate concerns expressed by the residents of 243 Steele Road, which will need to be addressed with respect to construction timing, where do they park, what kind of interruption do they have in their life should this get approved. And I think that's important because those people were not present in 2014 because they didn't reside here, but they are part of our community and they do have legitimate concerns with expectations that they are paying a significant rent to you, and they have expectations that quiet enjoyment in the morning and on the weekends and it's going to end at a particular time. Where are they going to park? Are their cars going to be filled with dust and dirt, and how that plays out, and that will need to be worked out. So that was the other concern I had here. But other than that, I think you rightfully, Attorney Pearson, outlined the criteria, and the only one that I think someone could possibly object on would be the first, as to whether or not they felt that it was in harmony with our comprehensive plan of development, and that would be probably left up to the individual to determine how they felt this development fit into that. But with respect to being a plan superior or harmony with the current thing and the density, I think if you add it all up on balance, it's all there. So that's what I wanted to get onto record. I thought it was very important to get on the record. That's why I asked that question.
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Barnes had a comment, and in the meantime,
I do.
could somebody grab the sign-up sheet too?
Well,
just so we can-
shall I conclude first?
I thought you might want to conclude after. But that's up to
Okay.
you, I guess.
That's okay. No, I have no problem with doing that. Okay.
Great. If we could just have Mr. Sager, if you could come back up for a second. I just want to follow up on your remarks there. You're a businessman, successful businessman, and you originally proposed approximately 200 units for this site. So I think that you did anticipate that you would be able to fill it and there would be some success. So I'm not so sure about misreading the market or where the people would come from or how successful it would be. It's been very successful and, certainly profitable and more so if we add, if you're permitted to add a seventh building. And with respect to Attorney Pearson's comments about, each application is new. Well, yeah, each application is new when it comes before us, but not this one. This one actually has history, right? So when Mr. Davidoff asked about it and went through it, where, we were at 200 units and we went down to 150 because on at least a couple nights back in 2014, we had a full room of residents in that neighborhood that were opposing this project, still opposing it at 150, and many of them came back when it was increased to 160. So there is a history here, and there's also going to be a question for us that we have to think about, which is, if it wasn't acceptable in 2014, and I understand that we didn't actually vote on it. I think there was community pressure that adjusted the size of the project downward. Why is it acceptable today to allow it to happen? Other than for the reasons that you explained about that, you misread the market. The question's still there. Why is it different a number of years later to essentially grant you exactly what you wanted a couple years before, which was denied at the time?
Thank you, Councilor So I don't think it's necessarily different for me, other than I've described, but I fully understand that when we were in front of you before, and this was a 3-story convent and a lawn, and we've got plans. I mean, surely you don't, I mean, as a professional, and I do this all day, every day, I can't tell you exactly what it's going to feel like, who's going to populate it. We have feelings and we tell you what we anticipate, but until it's built, until it's constructed, it's very hard to understand the scope, the impact, etc. And I would submit to you, although we knew at 200 units it would be acceptable, I think it's perfectly reasonable that you couldn't necessarily get there from a set of plans and understand it. But now it's in your community. And I would also submit to you for your consideration that many, many, many of those people, so we had 3 nights of hearings, and the one person that showed up was fine, and really all he wanted to do was pick my brain on what fence I used, because he wanted to use a similar fence in his yard. But in any event, the people that were against it earlier, just, I don't think I'm out on a limb when I say they just don't feel that way anymore. I mean, they look at the community, and I've got lots of friends in that community. They're fine with it. Okay, so, but I don't think that, again, it's reasonable for you back in 2014 to look at the plans and be able to get there. But now that we've built the community and you can see it and you can talk to people that are in the neighborhood, I think it's different. You can now look at this incrementally. It's just it's an ad, and I think it's easy to define. I think at inception, it's a lot tougher.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. So I have 2 people that have signed up. Mr. Gregory Donovan, and I think you're here with the troop, but I don't know if you wanted to speak to this public hearing. Okay. And then I have Kathleen Monis. So if you can come up, speak, and you have 3 minutes to speak, and you can, the mic goes on automatically. State your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Kathleen Monis, 84 Steele Road in West Hartford. I also have an email comment from Ms. Donna Waniak, also of Steele Road. Given the 3-minute limitation, I won't attempt to read that in, but I will send it to the council after today's meeting. My concerns as I sit here are absolute no consideration given to the Steele Road section between Asylum and Fern. And quite frankly, I spoke to Mr. Corsi in 2014, and I expressed a concern in 2014 concerning traffic. And Mr. Corsi assured me, no, the traffic will not be a problem at your corner. Mr. Corsi, with all due respect, you were absolutely wrong. And the traffic expert here, you are absolutely wrong. The difference in traffic on our corner of the street is tremendous. It's not just from 7:30 in the morning to 8:30 in the morning. It lasts until about 9:30. I take pictures at my window of the backup, which is typically 8 to 10 cars at a given point in time. That was never like that. Okay, I recognize when we moved in 2001 that Steele is not a quiet street. It has relative traffic, but never like this. And the residents on our corner I've spoken to throughout today, and each one that I've talked to, which I think has been 3 of them, have expressed similar concerns. So to have the de minimis, the very small, the insignificant comments that I've heard today about the effect of the residents on our part of the street, I quite frankly am offended by, because I think it's a real concern. So I would ask this committee to please consider the effect, the greater effect, on the residents, not the effect on the Steele Road section from Albany to Asylum, where already traffic calming measures have been implemented, but instead the greater parcel of Steele Road, where in fact there has been no effort to either study, consider, or remedy the traffic increase. With regard to density, I sit here and say, what has changed since 2014? I read the entire transcript of the 2014 public hearing and the concerns expressed by residents. The same density considerations that were at issue in 2014 should be there today. There's, 200 down to 150, up to 160. Now we're back again at 190. What justifies the change in circumstance to allow this applicant to build what they originally requested and then withdrew in recognition of the neighborhood, the community, and the town concerns? It's coming back to the well again without any legitimate change in circumstance other than they want to make a profit, and a profit at the risk and the expense of the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Monis. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to this public hearing? Come on up and state your name.
Yes, good evening. My name is Sean Harrington. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the University of St. Joseph. And I think for the record, our institution submitted a letter of support for this project from the president. And I think in terms of what this evening, Mr. Sager's comments about the impact the development has had on our institution, both from the School for Young Children and the university, has been very positive. And we're very much in support of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do you reside in West Hartford?
Unfortunately, I do not. I'm a long-term resident of Rocky Hill.
Okay,
I've been working at the university for 8 years.
Were we supposed to suspend the rules to accept it, but not for public hearing?
He's representing the
The
University of St.
okay,
Joseph.
that's fine. Thank you so much.
And the
Appreciate your
university's
comments.
been there a long time, so.
Okay, yes, it has. Thank you. Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, with that, Attorney Pearson, would you like to close?
Well, some very, very quick housekeeping, because indeed some issues came up about what is in the record. I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page with regard to that. I do have a listing. You do have a January 31, 2018 Statement of Sewer Adequacy that came in from the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District. So I know that's here, I've seen it, so it should be in your files. You do have police and fire emails, both of which groups or departments said they had no issues with the plans. They were dated January 2 and February 2 respectively. Planning department comments, you do have a letter from the planner indicating, and that was February 2, indicating that as long as the engineering comments are fine, that everything should be okay, or they had no additional comments. Engineering, you have a February 2, 2018 memo from them saying all engineering comments have been satisfactorily addressed. The Conservation and Environment Commission met on January 2 and said they had no concerns with the application. You should have a transmittal with regard to that. If not, there are minutes that are on the website that say that. The Design Review Advisory Committee unanimously recommended in their January 29, 2018 letter to you that the application is consistent with DRAC's performance criteria, and a quote from that letter states, "The DRAC notes that the existing buildings were built in a manner consistent with the design plans and expects the seventh building to be of equal quality. In addition, the applicant's continued willingness to work with the University of St. Joseph and its other neighbors is commendable." The Town Plan and Zoning Commission letter should be in your file. They made a unanimous recommendation of approval at its February 5th meeting. The letter is dated February 7th, and in it they made a specific finding that the request is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development, which should go on the record. And then finally, you have a February 13th letter from the Inland Wetland Agency, and of course you can't vote until you have that in your possession. And it does say that the application was approved, and I think it's important to note for you that there is a condition that they required of the applicant to be imposed on that application, and that is that a conservation easement would be applied to the property over that area where the detention basin is. So if you look at the plans, it's the only open area left adjacent to Building 7. That will be encumbered by a conservation easement which says basically there's no future development that can take place there, other than what's required with regard to the management and maintenance of the detention basin. So with regard to the findings, this goes to why the application is appropriate for your approval, and it's basically a summary of the points that we've made with this proposal regarding the standards of review that you have. And the proposed changes, and I'm reading actually from our letter of application, but it says the proposed changes as set forth in the application are in harmony with the overall objectives of the comprehensive plan, the first requirement that you have to look at, as they will support the continued use of the property for the type of higher density multifamily uses specifically authorized within an RMMS district. And you've got to remember that that is the highest density district that can be allowed for development in West Hartford. So the RMMS district, without overburdening the site, and will remain compatible with the other multifamily uses within the Mercy community. In keeping with the goals of the comprehensive plan, the proposed new building, site improvements, and landscaping constitute an ongoing reinvestment in the property, a requirement of the items that you are supposed to consider in determining whether there's been compliance with the comprehensive plan. Allows for the orderly expansion of a successful residential community, adds approximately $150,000 in tax revenue to the town's grand list with the new building, provides additional housing opportunities for persons who will ultimately support area businesses, and places no additional burdens on the municipality. This proposal clearly results in the continued orderly and beneficial development of the property and benefits area properties. So that's the requirement inherent in that finding that you have to make regarding compliance with the comprehensive plan. Because, and the other component of a special development district, or another one, is that the design of the development is better than that which might be required or could be required of an applicant without being subject to a special development district. And you heard the DRAC findings. What they basically said in their recommendation to you is that there was excellent in design with the application that was already approved, and this continues that with regard to this particular proposal. It's important also to note that the requested change in the regular side yard standard for building number 7 will not have a noticeable visual design impact given its proximity to the driveway and open area of the adjacent Macaulay facility and the acquiescence of the Macaulay, which is in the record also. Proposed building number 7 will be in harmony with the current development within SDD 139. It has been placed well behind the existing residential structures, far from Steele Road, and in the northwest corner of the property, furthest from the single-family neighborhood to the south. The applicant believes there will be no deleterious change in the character of the area as a result of the addition of building number 7 to this quiet, fully occupied residential complex. There is no reason to believe that it will be detrimental to the status quo or to the permitted development of adjacent residential properties, either because of traffic generated or the physical changes to the northwesterly corner of the property. And again, I know any additional traffic might be unacceptable to people who oppose this application from the very beginning, but I think it's important to remember what Mark Vertucci said, and that is with this increase, even if you use the higher standards as opposed to what actually has been generated from the site, you're only going to see or experience in the peak traffic time an additional car every 8 to 12 minutes. Frankly, it would be a challenge, and that's at the driveway. It would be a challenge to be able to feel that at a location that's in the other end of Steele Road. And I understand the vehemence with which people might have objected to the original application and concerns for additional traffic now, but rationally, this is not something that is going to be able to be felt on the street as a result of this proposed 30-unit building. And finally, The total density of development in terms of floor area and land coverage will not be greater than that permitted in the underlying RMMS district in which the property is located. So for all those reasons, we feel that we've met the findings that you have to keep in mind and consider when you decide the application. I hope we've been able to convince you that this is a worthy addition to this development, which has, we feel, been so positive, really, for both the neighborhood in terms of the off-site improvements that have been made and overall for the town as a result of creating a sense of place, a desirable residential community in West Hartford, and for all the reasons that Mr. Sager went through when he talked to you about how it really does a service to the community to be able to provide a development like this. So we hope you can approve the application. Thank you. Obviously, we'll answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Attorney Pearson. Any questions? Okay, I am just going to read in what I am told to read into the record as well, which Attorney Pearson covered it all, but a letter dated February 7, 2018 from TPZ recommending approval, letter dated February 13th from Inland Wetlands recommending approval, and letter dated January 29th, 2018 from DRAC also recommending approval. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing and we're going to take a 5-minute break and then we'll start the council meeting. And I apologize to Troop 484. We'll be back really, really soon. Thank you.
Hey, Chris.
I don't know.
Yes, I know.
I was going to ask you if it was like a more traditional stuff. I was like, my daughter's Olivia. Her grandmother. Feminine version of both. And it's like, yeah. And if you go to Eastern Europe, Michael is often Kyle or Kale, so that would be a tradition. I can ask Todd if it was a condition. Just off the bat, it was here, I don't see it here now. Let me just talk about
You want to talk about it? Sure. I don't know if you talked to Matt. Go for it, whatever. You heard what she said today.
That was at the last one we're meeting.
Yeah, I got Matt. I know he felt, he wanted. I didn't see him today, yeah.
Were you looking for me?
All right, let's get this party filling them down.
I was sitting a lot.
Yes. Okay, Omar, the previous guy suggested.
Yeah, that's the way it's Who was the previous guy?
Omar.
Apparently not there long enough. Yeah.
They don't have leaders, they don't have leaders like Yuri and
They were from there, we're up to the
Perez.
That's why you play the
I'm gonna get these there.
We'll be asking you for sick. Yeah, they will. They will. That happened the last time. I went down.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I don't know. Just, you know. I knew you were going to say that. I don't know. I just I started going to the gym 4 times a week. I just started last week.
I'm probably gonna feel that way Thursday afternoon when I'm done with my furniture moving odyssey. My son-in-law and I are gonna carry a hide-a-bed up to our second floor condo in DC. Weighs 350 pounds.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's gonna be an inch. I spent the summer as a furniture mover, so I actually know how.
You know what I have that's great? They have those straps.
Yeah, I do
on
too.
your shoulder.
Yeah.
It just, you don't minimizes any back strain.
Yeah, I spent the summer as a furniture mover, and we actually we had a 7-foot long hide-a-bed that we moved for the Dutch COUNSEL in Montreal, and we went to put it in the elevator in the apartment. We took it up 9 flights by the stairs. We put 2 guys above, 2 guys below, and every floor we traded up. And it was a scissor stair, so it was like.
Did you get a big tip?
Yeah. Well, no, on that one we didn't get as big a tip as we should have gotten. Because the wife.
going to start with, thank you very much, Troop 44. You can, I know you're out to sneak out. Come on up. You're going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And Gregory Donovan is your leader. I don't know if he's still here or if he had to go. I know a number of you had to run for school, but. Okay. We'll start when you start.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, nation under God, liberty and justice.
Very much, and I apologize again for this going late and you had to stay. Get your homework done. Okay. Once a mother, always a mother. All right. Roll call, Ms. Abreu.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor. Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd. And Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. Before I go on, I just want to explain that Mr. Privatere is filling in for Mr. Hart this evening. Mr. Hart is actually at an ICMA conference, which is the Association of Town Managers from around the world, actually, and he is in Tel Aviv. His trip is paid for, just take note, by ICMA. He's on the executive board, and he has minimized the trip and made it as compact as he possibly can, traveling across the world. So we wish him an enriching experience and safe travels. And then we will go to number 4, Ms. Kerrigan.
I move approval of the minutes of the Town Council meeting January 23rd, 2018, as well as public hearing 21 Brace Road on January 23rd, 2018, and the public hearing of 999 South Quaker Lane on January 9th, 2018.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 5 is the public forum. We will look to see if anyone signed up. This is an opportunity for you to speak to anything that's on the agenda that's not the subject of a public hearing, and there's nothing on the agenda that's not been a public subject of the public hearing, so there should be nobody. So there we go. All right, number 6, Mrs. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we place items number 13 to 18 on the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 7, Ms. Kerrigan.
I move approval of the application on behalf of Steele Road, LLC, seeking approval of an amendment to the Special Development District Number 139, located at 243 Steele Road and known as the Residences at Steele Road, requesting approval of a new 30-unit residential building in the northwest area of the property and associated site improvements, including landscape, parking, and stormwater management design changes.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. This was the subject of a lengthy public hearing, a very comprehensive public hearing. And I was wondering if anyone would like to comment on before we vote. And we will be doing a roll call vote. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, to the applicant, Mr. Sager, I appreciate the investment in our town that you've made to date. And for the presentation today, I thought it was thorough. From my perspective, I think that this application comes down to really an agreement that was made between the community and Mr. Sager in the past in terms of the scope of the development. We've heard some objection. We've received some correspondence which objected to what is an impact on the residents' lives in the community that surrounds the development. So I think, from my perspective, that there is a harmony issue in terms of the development and how it's going to impact the surrounding area. I think as this community pushes more and more towards looking for revenue with respect to our state situation, what have you, I think increasingly we're going to be having to deal with a consideration of density, whether it's the center, whether it's Steele Road, wherever it may be. And this is going to be a trend moving forward, the tension between revenue and development and density, and also the impact it has on surrounding residential neighborhoods. I would note that in this particular case, I think that it's too much density in this particular area. And so I won't be supporting the application this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anybody else? Okay, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank you for breathing some hope in terms of the economy into our town. Because, like yourself, I believe that strong communities are what drive the economy, and West Hartford is a strong town. I will be supporting this. I want to give you credit for having the courage to come before us, knowing that you've been here before. And I think what that speaks to is what you believe in terms of why this serves West Hartford, why we need you, and why you need us. I think it's tough. Change is tough. And to Kathy, you know, I can appreciate, you know, traffic. Quite frankly, I live on Arnoldale. I drive down Steele all the time because my kids go to Hall. And quite frankly, from a speed standpoint, I would rather be on Steele than on Arnoldale. I really have a fondness for how you integrate mixed generations, something that I'm sensitive to. The fact that you can bring millennials and a senior population, empty nesters together, I think is enriching for everybody. The contemporaries who have sat at this table, who are no longer here, have moved, some of them have moved out of West Hartford for just that reason. They don't have a place like this, didn't at the time, to live in. And when they leave, we lose, you know, the coffee shop loses, the retail loses, the restaurants lose, Playhouse on Park loses, the movie houses lose. We lose a lot when individuals leave. I appreciate so much what you've done, you know, the school for young children, the accommodations in terms of the parking, the aesthetics on the road, the stones there are beautiful. There are residents I know that live on Steele Road who are not shy about voicing their opinion about everything, and I have not heard from them, and I have not seen them, and I'm pretty accessible, so I take that as a testament that they think this is a good thing. And just to mention Corsi's outreach here, when I read through them, most of it, the theme is our fears when you were here before the council, I was not here at the time, quite frankly, were unfounded. There is increased traffic, no doubt, one could expect, but the good side is that we are receiving so much more, and you are providing a need for the residents of West Hartford to keep us strong. And there were no concerns that anyone mentioned in terms of the outreach, so I will be supporting this. And I do thank you for supporting West Hartford.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Barnes.
Thank you. So this is my third term on the council, and I think we've had an application in connection with this project each of the terms. And as I mentioned in my comments, I'm concerned about the history of it and how it's evolved. Aside from that, I drive by there and it's beautiful, right? I mean, it came out great. It's certainly an improvement from what was there. From my observations driving by there in the morning, excuse me, on the way to work, you know, I don't see a lot of traffic coming out of there. And I go through there, whether it's 7, 7:38, 8:30, different times, different days, and it just doesn't come across as you know, congested to me, or a high level of traffic. And so I struggle between the first part, which is, you know, what we were told and how we ended up where we are, and with the fact that, you know, I think in terms of the size of the parcel, I'm not so much concerned about the density. I think it fits. The traffic seems to support, you know, a reasonable level of traffic. We haven't had the noise complaints, and I actually know a few folks that live there and love it. And so while I'm torn, I'm inclined to support the application tonight. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Okay, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I first would like to thank the applicant for a very thorough presentation this evening. I think all the issues that need to be addressed were addressed with respect to community outreach, engineering concerns, traffic concerns, the standards that we need to decide whether or not to approve or deny this application. As one of the two people who did vote in 2014 in favor of this application, and the reason I was one of two is that are still here is Mr. Barnes and I were here for that vote night. The rest of the members are new to this body. I think the reasons Mrs. Cantor was here, but she didn't sit on this particular application. And it was a very long night, and we heard a lot of testimony, and it was a very interesting process that started earlier with a packed room of residents, went through a change and still had quite a few residents, and I think we were here till, I think I said till like 3:30 in the morning before we came to, I think, an 8-1 vote the first time. And density was the issue, as long with also traffic and uncertainty as to what the process would be. At the time, there were other projects being proposed for apartments. We were sort of in this change of housing developments throughout town, whether it be in the center or be over here, as to changing what millennials wanted, what empty nesters wanted, what people wanted for housing stock, and what was missing from West Hartford. And I remember from that evening there was a discussion as to the quality of the amenities that were going to be offered here. And at the end of the evening, I did feel very comfortable that this project would serve our community well, would keep people in West Hartford or draw people to our community. And as it's been shown, it has proven to be the fact because it's 100% occupied. And there was some concern about college students and whether or not they were going to be a majority of the tenants, and that really hasn't fanned out either. And as the demographics were revealed during the presentation, it showed who's here. And it's basically a lot of people getting their first jobs, being attracted to hopefully will be a Connecticut economy in rebound. These are people that see home ownership not the same way that my parents saw home ownership. They like flexibility of being able to move from location to location as their job or life changes take place. So on balance, that's all very, very good. There was some discussion about the brick pavers along Steele Road, and the mayor and I did meet with the resident about that and the noise that was associated with that when people were forced out onto those pavers as a distraction to that resident. They could hear additional noise as traffic traversed through that. But as Mr. Sager said, there was a lot of commitments made to the community with respect to things that he said he was going to do, and he did them. The intersection at Asylum and Steele to make it a four-way walk was completed. The hammerhead at the top of Stratford was completed. The traffic calming measures and the speed signs along Steele Road were taken into account, making it safer for people utilizing the school for young children at drop-off times did happen. And it's been 4 years since we had that vote, and we have not heard from people in close proximity to your project complaining that XYZ was not done. There was also a commitment that this was going to be heavily screened for the residents of Trumbull and Buckingham, and it has been. And you've remained a good neighbor with Mercy community as well as with the University of St. Joseph. And I think that speaks volumes. What we heard this evening that is still bothersome to me is the issue that we had not anticipated, and that is the traffic that is at the corner of Steele and Fern. And yes, I have seen where the cars queue 10 back in the morning hour or in the evening hour. Do I think that's a detriment to this application? Do I think it's directly because of this particular project? I can't conclusively say that that's the case. But what it does say to me is we now are aware that there's a situation at that intersection that we as town councilors need to address and find a solution to make that a safe intersection for our residents and for those traversing. Should the burden fall upon this applicant? I think not. But I think that we need to really look at that and say, what can we do to make things a little bit better over there? What measures can we take to improve the quality of life for residents there? And I think that that's something that I'm willing to take and to look at. And as chair of the Public Safety Committee, we'll speak to our police department to see if there's any traffic strategies that may be able to be put in place to deal with that, or deal with the speed of the traffic that may be going from Asylum to Fern in those hours. But I don't think it's a problem that's unique to that particular stretch of property. I think every time we have a zoning application, we hear about things like that. So I do appreciate the residents for bringing that to our attention, because I don't think that we should be deciding this in a vacuum, because those are real concerns, and if I lived there, I'd feel the same way about that. With respect to the community outreach, yes, Mr. Corsi, it's not your job to tell people to support or not support the project. It's basically just tell us what they're thinking. And what I got from the community outreach that you performed were that the majority of the people who you contacted were in support of this proposal. I was very glad to hear this evening that the applicant was willing to accept the conservation easement for that last parcel on the site so that it won't become developed any further. And I think that's very important. I think that's responsible ownership of a parcel of land, to make certain that you put aside some portion of your property for the interest of our earth and of nature and things that function on the site in nature on its own. So I think that's very, very important. With respect to all the conditions that Attorney Pearson outlined with respect to how we need to decide a special development district application, it's clear that we have to decide it based on what's presented before us. In the one that was the previous amendment, when we changed the 10 additional units, I couldn't support that, because I thought that that change was really quickly right after the one that we had just heard, and I thought that was more based on economics than on zoning. But tonight, I'm not looking at this as an economic decision. I'm looking at this as a zoning decision, and I do think that the application is in harmony with our comprehensive plan of development, that there is no superior plan that could be suggested to be put in place. Obviously, the building is going to be in harmony with the existing buildings already on the structure, as outlined in the DRAC memo, which said that the building materials would be of the same materials that were used, and there would be no incentive for the applicant to try to design something totally inconsistent with what is a very beautiful development in place. And with respect to that, I think it's very important that people just go back to pre-2014 and realize what used to be there. And what used to be there was a very ugly, blighted housing for the sisters that was had broken windows, and it was dilapidated, and people were like, when are we going to clean this up? Because it's a really nice neighborhood, being on Steele Road and adjacent to Elizabeth Park, one of our gems in the area. So on balance, I'm going to support this application this evening. I think the reason I asked that question this evening was clear. I think, Mr. Sager, I really appreciate your honest and sincere opinion that people want to be in West Hartford. And I've been saying that for a very long time. People do want to be in West Hartford. Your project is evidence of the fact that people want to be in West Hartford, and they will even pay a premium rent to live in West Hartford, because that rent of $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom in den is twice my mortgage payment, which includes my property taxes. So that speaks volumes to me, that people really want to be in our community. And there's a lot of good reasons why people do. And I think if we hold out this project to others who wish to do redevelopment in our community, I think your project stands as a model or a standard as such that we should judge other proposals by them. That's how good I think your proposal is. And the only other thing I will add is your other project, I think, on Albany Avenue has also received equally great reviews as well for that rehab and reuse of that parcel. So you're a quality developer who stands by his word, who employs good professionals in their presentations, comes forward and speaks the truth and is honest in their presentation and sincerely believes in what you're doing. And for all those reasons, I will wholeheartedly support your application this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. There's little to say after that, but I will say.
Thank you.
I want to thank Mr. Sager for your investment in our community, your quality, well thought out investment in our community, and the efforts that you have taken to answer questions and concerns of residents. When Mr. Davidoff and I went to the house that was very concerned about the crease in the tar line and some of the noise, he had said it's not because anybody hasn't been responsive, and you tried to fix that in many ways, and then determined that there just was not a fix that was going to please that particular resident. He actually understands he's still unhappy with it, but he's happy with the project. So the efforts that you went and improved all of the properties, all of the area around in your neighbors, the School for Young Children, the University of St. Joseph's, the Mercy community, the concern that you had for all the residents on Stratford, don't go unnoticed, and they're sincerely appreciated. This development was transformational when you came to us in 2014. West Hartford, I don't think, was quite ready, as Mr. Davidoff said. We weren't used to rentals in residential neighborhoods. It was more in, sort of on the edge of a commercial district. We were just starting to see that. So to be in a purely residential area was unique. But we saw what was going on around us, the planning for Bloomfield, the planning for Simsbury, what was happening in Hartford, what was happening in Glastonbury. And thousands of apartments have come online, and they are renting, and they are doing well. And what is happening is we are getting turnover in industries like UTC that have to hire young engineers, and many other industries that are having that worker class that we want to have the ability to house them here. And if we don't have that product, we're not going to have that ability. But like you said, what hit me really hard was those people that wanted to stay in West Hartford and didn't have the possibility and the opportunity to move in West Hartford. There really wasn't the, and it's still limited, it's still expensive. But if you have an asset that you can unload and you can have another family, maybe that rented for a little while, that now is settling in as making West Hartford their home and turning that over, that's critical to our community. So I see what you see. I see a lot of excitement and interest in our area. I see a lot of young people moving here because of professional opportunities, and I'm grateful that we have this product to be able to answer that and to have hundreds of people that are a couple hundred people that live here that might not otherwise call West Hartford their home. I want to again thank Attorney Pearson for an incredibly thorough application, because it always, every time I look like, oh my gosh, that question's answered, it's remarkable, the quality of the presentation. I also want to thank our town staff. I know this has been a very long-term project and making sure that everything worked. I also drive, that's my main artery. I run, I ride, I bike, I drive my car on that artery, actually all the way down Steele. I've seen some queuing on Steele, but I've always seen queuing on Steele. I had a house on Foxcroft for 18 years. And and that is something that we have to be aware of as we change some living patterns. And West Hartford Center has changed, and Bishop's Corner has changed, and the cut-throughs and as we have Waze maps that change, that allow us to cut through different areas. We have to pay attention to that and figure out how the quality of life of our residents are not negatively impacted by people being told to take a shortcut by somewhere. So that's something that we have to work on. Is it because of this project? I don't think it's because of this. Is this making it a little bit more, maybe a car or two that we notice at a peak time, but it's not something to deny an investment of $1 million in our community. And we can address those problems and work on them. But I appreciate the residents that bring those to us and are candid about their concerns. I also have noticed the speeds have gone down by the traffic calming, and that may be, again, relating to the queuing a little bit too, which I think is a benefit for the safety of people on that street. But again, something that we can look at and continue to work. Again, I want to thank you. I'm going to finish by thanking you for your investment, thanking you for your continued commitment to our community and your inspiring words, because I think if we don't believe in our own communities, who will? So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And with that, we will do a roll call vote.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
No.
So that's 8-1 and approved.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules for a resolution that I have to find. Okay, thank you. A lot of paper tonight. A resolution authorizing the town manager to enter into a lease agreement with Rockledge Tavern LLC.
I move we refer to.
No, you say second?
Oh, second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. I'm sorry, we're just suspending the rules. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And now, Ms. Kerrigan, you want to make your motion?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Now we go to reports from the town manager, Mr. Privatera.
Thank you. I'll try to be as brief as possible. UConn Survey and Community Visioning Forum, over 2,200 people responded to a 13-question opinion survey on the future use of the West Hartford UConn property. The survey closes February 16th, so there's still time to share your thoughts. Of the 2,200 respondents, nearly 500 people expressed interest in attending a community visioning forum later this month. To accommodate as many participants as possible, the town's planning office has rescheduled the forum to Wednesday, February 28th, and changed the format. There will be 3 identical 90-minute sessions held at 4, 6, and 8 p.m. in the Town Hall Auditorium. The public is invited to sign up for one of these sessions. Simply go to the town website, and you'll see a link to additional website where you can sign up for the sessions. Police chief recruitment. The recruitment for the next police chief began on January 23rd. The position has been marketed to a variety of different associations. The deadline for the application is the end of this week, Friday, February 16th. To date, we've received 23 applications from candidates. After this week, all applicants will be reviewed and screened, and determinations will be made as to which candidates will be advancing in the process. The West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, in collaboration with the West Hartford Public Schools, held a flu shot clinic on Saturday, February 3rd at the West Hartford Town Hall Auditorium, in which 250 persons were immunized. The ratio was 2 adults to 1 child. Most people were from West Hartford, but overall, the health district vaccinated people from 10 towns. The best defense against the flu is a flu shot. If anyone would like to be vaccinated, they can call the Health Department District Office at 860-561-7900 to make an appointment. A public notice from Eversource on tree trimming. Eversource has provided the town with a list of streets that are scheduled for vegetation maintenance work on the electric transmission right-of-way. To review the list of streets, go to the West Hartford site and click on the Public Works Office, and you'll see a list of the streets. Today is the deadline for the League of American Bicyclists application for bicycle-friendly community. We received the bronze level recognition in 2014 and are seeking the silver level designation. The bicycle-friendly community program provides a roadmap to improve conditions for bicycling and gives guidance to make a community's vision for a better, more bike-friendly community a reality. Some other announcements from outside agencies. The Department of Transportation invites the community to a public information meeting on the safety and operational improvements on I-84 in West Hartford on Wednesday, February 14th at the Town Hall Auditorium. An open forum for individual discussions with DOT officials will begin at 6:30 p.m. and a formal presentation will follow at 7 p.m. Community Development block grant applications, public hearings. It's anticipated that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development will be allocating approximately $875,000 in community development block grant funds to the town of West Hartford in the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. CDBG activities must provide a benefit principally to low and moderate income persons. 2 public hearings are scheduled during which interested parties can learn more about West Hartford CDBG programs and make public comment. The hearings will be held on Tuesday, February 27th from 6 to 7 p.m. at Elmwood Community Center, room 110, 1066 New Britain Avenue, and Wednesday, February 28th, 5 to 6 p.m., Town Hall, room 217, 50 South Main Street. All of these reports and additional information is available on the town's website under the Town Manager's Department, and you'll see a link to Town Manager reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. That was helpful. Okay, so I have a few announcements, and then I'll open up to see if anybody else has. Ice cream social and fundraiser for Conard High School musical. Rehearsals are in full swing for this production of Urinetown the musical. Join the cast and crew at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, February 14th in the auditorium. Enjoy a ice cream social. Tickets are $5 at the door. The performances actually begin on Friday, March 9th. And ticket for performances will be available beginning February 21st at ConardHighSchoolMusical.com. Winter Wine Dinner on Thursday, February 22nd. Metro Beast will host a pop-up restaurant at the Noah Webster House. This evening will feature 5 courses of food, each paired with wine specifically chosen to enhance the culinary experience. All proceeds benefit Noah Webster House and West Hartford Historical Society. Tickets are $100, and the price includes all food and drink during the evening, and the tickets are on sale at noahwebster.yapcity.com. 5th Annual Taste of Elmwood will take place on Wednesday, February 21st, 5 to 7:30 at the beautiful lobby of Corporate Center West, 433 South Main Street. The restaurants involved are Cafe Louise, Chick-fil-A, Classic Cakes, Corner Pub, Fernwood Restaurant, Goldberg's, KT Bakery, and Sliders. Tickets are $30 when you buy 2 to 3 tickets, $25 each, or 4. This doesn't really mean $25 each for 4 or more. Sorry, $40 for singles and at the door. The event supports the Elmwood Business Association. Go to weha.com/store to purchase tickets. 5th Annual Take 5 All Access Party, West Hartford Community Television, which we rely on very heavily to broadcast so many community events, including these meetings, will hold its 5th Annual Take 5 All Access Party on Friday, March 2nd at 7 p.m. at the Pond House Cafe. The event features food, cocktails, entertainment, as well as exciting, and I'm sure excellent, silent auction items. Every penny raised at this event will support West Hartford Community Television. This year, the station hopes to raise $22,000 to replace its server that keeps the channel up and running. Tickets are $50 in advance, $60 at the door. Consider being a sponsor with a donation ranging from $275 to whatever you want. It's limitless. Go to www.whctv.org to register and learn more. 60th anniversary of Hall High Pops and Jazz. This is the anniversary of this production. Acclaimed jazz bands, dancers, actors, and singers. The show opens on March 9th with additional performances on March 10th, 15th, 16th, and 17th at 7:30 p.m. Guest artists performing this year come from Hall's very own alumni that have made it in the music industry, and it's really a treat. Tickets are $18 for adults and $15 for students, and now available online at hallhighjazz.tix.com. And the last announcement is the Rotary Club of West Hartford's Vines of March. It will hold its 7th annual wine tasting and auction at University of St. Joseph's on March 10th, 7 to 10:30. Spend the night tasting an array of red and white wines, noshing on samples from several of West Hartford's finest restaurants, winning fantastic prizes, and doing good. Tickets are $60 per person. Go to www.westhartfordrotary.org. Proceeds benefit the Rotary Club's charitable projects, many of which benefit much of West Hartford community. I do want to just expand on the community outreach for UConn. We are aware that this was a difficult date to schedule. We're aware that it actually is on the Jewish holiday of Purim, and the Purim activities usually start after 6 p.m., so we have a 4 o'clock session. If someone needs to get in for religious purposes, we will make sure that you get into that session. And if the need be, we will schedule another session in March to accommodate people that cannot make it that night. So is there anybody else that would have any other comments or anything? Okay. So we will go to Mr. Allaire, reports from Corporation Counsel.
I have no formal report. I regret I do need an executive session brief at the end of the meeting to discuss a matter of pending claim or litigation, the matter of Muchette versus Town of West Hartford, following which, if anybody's interested, I may be asking you to adopt a resolution, depending on the outcome of our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Allaire. Appointments are, we're looking for them. They're coming. No, they were on the reminders. Thank you. It's buried somewhere. I apologize. Too much paper. I would like to make a motion to appoint Linda Johnson as an alternate member to the Board of Assessment Appeals for a term ending 12/31/2020. Andrew Kellag to the Persons with Disability Commission for a term ending 12/31/2018. Mary Silverberg to the Persons with Disability Commission for a term ending 12/31/2020. And reappoint Moses Salas to the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District for a term ending 12/31/2020.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And number 19, Ms. Kiergan.
Move adoption of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 20, Ms. Kiergan.
Resignation letter from a Dennis Durao resigning from the Conservation and Environment Commission.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your service. We have no petitions, and we will have to go into executive session. I would like to make a motion to move into executive session.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We will be back shortly.
We'll talk. I thought maybe they're here. Yeah, or shot.